BITA, what's the message?
I was asked that question when we started the organisation in a room full of 8 people that I asked to come to the first meeting, and they said, what's BITA? And I said, it's people who know people that help people. They said, write that down, and we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think looking back on that statement of people who know people that help people is probably why we set it up in the first instance, because I felt that the generations had changed, that there was agendas were what's in it for me, or they would take you down a rabbit hole and they would try and sell you something when you didn't want selling to. And there was this kind of dishonesty after, happening, I suppose, to generations. And then when you actually leave a country and go into another culture, that's exacerbated. So my experience was naive leaving Ireland, coming into the UK thinking that, they speak English, is going to be the same. It was totally different. And as a result of that, I was getting more and more frustrated by being brought down a rabbit hole. There was costs put on me that were hidden. There was costs put on me that were upfront, but I wasn't getting what I wanted out of it. And there was a kind of almost what I would consider as a dishonesty. So I decided to reel this back and say, for God's sake, is there any organisation out there that have solid values of integrity, transparency, passion and delivery? And if you examine those words of, we'd say, transparency means that you understand the clarity of a message and it's there to be seen on a tin what it is. It's apparent. The passion is that you don't get it all your way all the time. And so you've got to overcome things, and it's having those people with that passion to actually overcome, circumnavigate, find a solution, find a way. So that was what I was trying to explain to people is, what is BITA? It's people who know people that help people, but are armed with the values of integrity, transparency, passion and delivery.
Do you think that's why it became so popular so fast?
I never envisaged what it would become, honest to God. I was probably, if I'm honest, doing it for my own frustration and selfish reasons to see, will something else work? It was when then we spoke to certain people who have values that suddenly got it and were really drawn towards this because there was nothing out there like it. When then that grew and you built, we'd say, a cohort of 25 to 50 to 100 people, and the synergies of conversations and values and honesty and transparency come into play, and you have people genuinely doing stuff for each other with nothing to gain, that generosity of spirit, it was just like, wow, this is electric, And then when you mix that with, we all work hard, we all kind of do our best on a day-to-day when we wake up in the morning to when we go to sleep at night. But when you're doing so and you're surrounded by people that it's transparent, you say what it is and they do what they say, it gives it a whole new meaning. So very quickly I realized that this is something here, and it became my passion to build it. It's like a drug when you start, you go in an area, and particularly like when you're in a different culture doing it, and you find these people and you break down the barriers of creed, nations coming together, people coming together, cultures coming together, and you see the magic that happens when the common core theme is that transparency, honesty, passion, and delivery.
You're clearly very passionate about BITA, but I'm really keen to kind of find out where that comes from. Like, could you tell us a little bit about your years in Cork and how that kind of formed your career path when you were first starting off?
Well, I suppose, my passion would be, it comes from my parents. It comes from my upbringing. They were very honest people, hardworking people. My father was theatrical. He was an actor. And so everything was like, exacerbated hugely by, if he cut his finger, it was like chopping off his hand. So God forgive me, I've said that now here, he'll probably rock my grave. But anyway, it's down to your upbringing. It's down to the way you were reared. And we were reared from, we didn't have much. In fact, we had not a lot at all. But we had very honest hard-working parents. My father had a heart attack when he was 39 and again when he was 49 and was on disability benefit. And, so as kids, when it came to birthdays and Christmas, 5 in a family, there wasn't an awful lot in the pot. So everything was kind of regenerated. And you had other kids on the streets that you'd be looking at with an Action Man, but mine was made of timber, from the tree that fell down. So, and this is where, when you live life like that, it gives you a serious grounding. So my passion has derived a lot from that, and what really makes me tick now is looking back and reminding yourself of where you've come from and how the world has changed and how you've changed with that. But if you can retain some of the values that you were born and reared with, I think it's hugely, hugely impactful and important.
And can you tell us what would have inspired you then to move to the UK in the first place and get involved in politics and sales and that side of your career?
So, politics wouldn't inspire me, first of all, at all. But again, so it wasn't an inspiration to leave, it was a force to leave. So Ireland imploded 2008-9 in the industry that I was in, which was construction, in supply chain and sales. And I happened to be just nowhere to go. I was in my mid-40s after working for a company for 23 years and felt I gave my heart and soul to them, and they went bust. And it was bought over by a multinational, and I was forced out of my job. So I was made redundant. And I'll always remember going home and I was saying to my dad, I'm made redundant, what am I going to do? And he said to me, go for a game of golf. And I went into my mother and I said, that useless bollocks, just don't talk about your father like that. And I went out for a game of golf and I was on the 4th or 5th hole and I was chatting to my buddy and he said to me, why don't you go to England? He said, you do well in England, And I'll always remember coming home and I said to my father, I'm going to go to England. And he said to me, what hole did that happen on? See, look at the wisdom of people, and you're in a sheer panic situation and, you don't know what to do. And I suppose the wisdom of the man was able to turn around and said, you know what, no, he needs to go away and think about things. And the best place to do is on a golf course.
And would there have been a pivotal moment then before you started BITA? Can you remember there was one moment when you thought, I'm going to start BITA?
Going back to the politics first was a great experience for me. I had a buddy who was an aspiring politician who's turned out to be one of probably the best politicians that I know. He's so committed to it. And I became his director of elections by default because I was a bit of a mouthpiece and I was able to corral people around the place. So when it came to elections, that's fairly handy to have. But then I got to know about his politics, about politics, and about people. And then it became a drug in itself because every cycle of an election is 4 years. And it's fascinating when you stay in the game and 4 years later, you're going to the same house and you see the kids growing up. And 4 years later, they're adults. And 4 years later, they're telling you that my mother's passed away. And you look at life, how life changes so quickly. We don't see ourselves growing up. But I was in that cycle for 25 years, never lost an election. And that was, I suppose, my love for people started there. When you see the transition of people and the evolution of people. And in Cork in particular, there wasn't a lot of movement. So when you went to a house in the north side of Cork, the same family was there, 25 years later. It was fascinating. And then seeing the evolution of the politician himself, Billy Kelleher, and what he did and how he grew as a politician. I can always remember the first time he was going on television and I was nervous for him. It was only on kind of like the local television station in Cork, but I was nervous for him. And years later, then I see him now and I go, God, can he speak, But it's not what you speak, it's what you're speaking about. And it's your passion for and understanding for and your learning of a subject matter over a period of time. You have to kind of applaud people for that. Politics is an awful game. I wouldn't go near it, because I'd probably say fuck too much. And the PC world will get hold of me. But, looking at these people and admiring what they do, that showed me, that people is my currency. And that's what I fell in love with. So when I went over to England and I had to make my way, I soon realised that there was such a gap between the culture of both countries that there needed to be a platform that we could actually communicate and suss each other out. And the sussing each other out is building a relationship. So BITA was born on the basis of giving us time to build a relationship. Don't shut me off straight away. Give me time to tell my story and give me time for me to find out your story. So that's what BITA became, is that platform to do so of communication.
Do you think that when you were on the road doing the politics and going to the houses, like you said, like every 4 years and you're seeing the family growing up, did it give you a sense of that everything is finite? And knowing that, did that push you to act? Because you kind of act really quickly once you make a decision on things. Like,
do you know what it does is it educates you, and it's amazing when you're from your 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s and examine the person you are. I think I only got confidence when I was 50, and I can't understand where that came from. And when I say confidence, no, I'm talking about the real confidence of being able to say something you mean. Because the courage in your convictions are based on experiences that you've had before. And you've gained that experience so that you can actually turn around and know what works because it worked for you. So I think what we as people can be challenged with is it's being brave early and having the courage of your convictions. I'm now 57 years of age, and I often say to people, how I feel, straight away, which some people would see as arrogance. It's not arrogance. It's basically, I've worked hard enough to build, this organization to what it is. So if someone's going to take it in a different direction, of course I'm going to challenge that.
so when you make decisions then, do you think it's made more on a gut decision or on data?
It's more on data now, but originally, I suppose, if I were to look at it honesty, it was gut. Would have led me that way. I think what you do is you learn. So, like, I'll always remember starting the organisation and there was people around me, and that's the importance of having people around you. People around me saw my vision, but I couldn't actually clarify my vision or convey my vision because I kind of, it was my vision was locked in my own head. It's when then people started talking around me about values, about integrity, transparency, passion and delivery, about the mission, goals and values and how to structure the messaging of any company, product or person or place, that became apparent to me. I just wanted to go from A to Z straight away. Forget about the rest of the alphabet, So I think what you learn from people around you, and you also learn that there is a way, there is a process, and those who actually don't cut corners will get to their destination quicker.
So when you make decisions now on data where you used to make them on your gut, what has served you better, do you think?
I think it's a mix of both. I think that there's, the industry we're in, particularly, isn't a flatline industry, and there's no definitive in it. And I think that you have to have the ability to flex. If you don't have the ability to flex and pivot, well, then you're going to be one of these people who will waste away. You'll be the candle that the wick burnt out of, So it's very important that as you go and as you grow, that you continue to let yourself be open to learning. Every day is a learning day, and you learn from the experiences and you watch and look around to others and see, innovation, that's what innovation is. So you've never got it sussed. You never got it sussed. It's like a game of golf. You go out and have a great day and you think, oh, that's it. I have it smashed. And then it bites you in the ass. That's what life does. Mm. And that's what the business does. And if you look at the organization, organization has to be constantly revised and constantly, refreshed. And that's what we challenge ourselves in doing now. Someone asked me the other day, are you proud of what we've achieved in BITA? And honestly, I actually see as I've only started, because I've learned so much. I've banked the learning. I love what I've learned, and I now know what not to do in some respects, but I can't wait to learn more.
Can you just take us back a bit to 2012 when you were starting off? You've got, there's a huge organisation now. Tell us about some of the challenges you faced back then when you were starting to grow the business.
I suppose the challenges I faced first was convincing myself that I had the bravery to actually try this. I remember the first day I sat on the ground and I mapped out a couple of people and companies, and I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to start up this. And she looked at me and she thought, like, this guy's on one, So I think the first person was a guy from Northern Ireland called Jim Whiteside, God rest him. And he was the first member in. And I went to Jim and I had a pint with him and I told him about the vision of the organisation. And he was a very gregarious kind of chap and gas man, but was totally into it from the get-go. And it was his enthusiasm was infectious on me. And I was going like, well, if he thinks it's good, well, there must be another fella will think it's good. And then as time went on, rolling on down the road a small bit, I met Dermot O'Grady, who's become probably one of my best buddies. But he was in London at a very successful business called Ardent Tide, and still has today. And basically, he was so enthusiastic about my enthusiasm that he said, I almost hoodwinked him into the corner to say, you're the vice president. He's locked in there since. But then it was meeting people like Pat Gallagher, people that you would looked upon and you saw the success that they had in their lives and what they created. A Leitrim man in Maidstone, incredible family, incredible. But listening to him, and even though he probably didn't know he was mentoring me, he was. And the gesture that he gave me at the start was, use my address. So he had I think Leitrim, Shannon House in Leitrim or something. I don't know what the address is. Leitrim House, I think it was, in Maidstone. And when I went out and I presented my business card of BITA, they looked at the business card. My name was, it didn't matter. BITA didn't matter. But they looked at the address and said, is that Pat Gallagher? And it was the integrity of that man gave me the ability to start to actually, for me to spread the word. He then introduced me to other people, his first cousin, Ray O'Rourke. And I'll always remember going into Ray O'Rourke and nervous as pie. This is one of the biggest construction companies in the world. And going in there and I was going, how did I get here? How did I get here to meet this man, And Ray was poker-faced. And as I was going in the door, I said to his secretary, she said, what's that there? And I said, oh, that's my laptop. And she just gave me a little piece of advice to say, he doesn't do death by PowerPoint. Put that away. Mm-hmm. So, and there's the luck that you have in the journey of life. So I was able to sit there, explain what this was, and Ray was just looking at me, no reaction. And I eventually basically turned around and I said, are you still alive? And he just smiled, thumped me in the chest and said, I'll support it. And that was it. And I was off, So you need your bit of luck on the way. And it's all about piecing it together, manifesting a situation where belief becomes belief in you. But then the work begins because you got to deliver. You can't come up with something and just leave it there. So I worked tirelessly for 12 years to build it to what it is today.
How has it evolved to 2024?
In terms of what is the size of it, or how has it evolved?
How did it evolve since 2000?
It evolved, I suppose, organically because of the very nature of the messaging that's in the organization about its authenticity, and it was new. It was a new approach to communication. It was an honest approach to communication, and it's not for everybody. But when it's understood by those who understand it, it becomes very useful. And then when we were able to utilize various different things to be able to join the dots, create the opportunities, retain the integrity. And then suddenly the giving nature of us was able to bring into vogue. I mean, we've raised £1.5 million for charity in 12 years, you know? And that's an audited figure. And that's no mean feat, but again, it's something that has happened over time. We don't, measure that. It happens. And then we find when we look over our shoulders and go, over the last 12 years, what have we done? That's what we've done.
Would you say that's been one of the biggest impact that BITA has made for communities or for business or for its members?
I think the biggest impact is actually the statement of what it is. I think that's the biggest impact, because if I describe the demise of better practice in my generation, so I'm 57 years of age, and I firmly believe that our generation were affected by technology and greed and the demise of better practice, cutting corners the faster, cheaper, quicker way. We'd kill each other to get to the front, That's not how we were reared.
Do you think that was Celtic Tiger?
Yeah, a lot to do with it. A lot to do with it, but technology was moving on as well, and social media and mobile phones. So it kind of like made it all go faster. But that's not how we were reared.
But do you think that something like BITA is doing so well because it's about face-to-face personal relationships as opposed to flipping WhatsApp groups and LinkedIn messages, that it's a lot more like, because you have the lunches, because you have the breakfast meetings, because you have the gala balls, that you actually get to look into the eyes of the guy that you might be doing business with, or didn't even think you were going to be doing this business with until you met them. Like, do you think that the personal touch that BITA has supersedes all the technology and all the blinking lights and fancy apps?
I think that the success probably is largely down to the people that understand what BITA is. Because one of the biggest challenges we have as an organisation is the change of narrative, and the fox dressed in sheep clothing who'll come in and try and hoodwink us all and be something that he's not, And that has to be managed. My favourite two words are fuck off.
I remember the first...
That's an adjective, by the way. It's not offensive. It's an adjective. And this is what you've got to learn. The PC world has made this world very difficult. And it's getting worse as we go. So the passion that comes with us is, I've proven that I put my heart and soul into something. So if someone comes into the room and changes that narrative, how dare they? So go and start another organisation, but don't disrupt what we're doing. And that's what we've got to protect. So the responsibility isn't just mine. The responsibility then becomes all the people within the community, down to chapter chairs, to board people, to members, to look at each other and say, hold on a minute, that's not how we do it, And that's where the joy comes in for me, because when I see that happening, and I don't have to be the marshal of that anymore, I can actually say, do you know what? Someone's listening. Someone's got it.
When I first started talking to you about BITA, right, one of the questions that I asked you, and it was important to me, is I said, how easy is it to get thrown out of this, right? And your answer was, it's simple. All you have to do is make a balls of something. All you have to do is a bad deal, and you're gone, right? But knowing the way people are, knowing the way business is, that means you're almost personally setting yourself up for an awful lot of disappointment, because you said earlier, like the fox in sheep's clothing, where you take someone at face value initially, and then yet again, they act a maggot with something else, right? So you get let down again because you're going, I thought this guy was an honest John, and it turns out that he's acting the maggot, right? What I want to know is, where does the resilience to keep getting up after being disappointed? Like, over 12 years, you must have been disappointed a lot, like.
Oh, yeah.
And so where does the resilience come from? Is that back to Cork in the 80s?
I suppose the resilience, is, we're the fighting Irish of the fighting Irish. And in Cork in particular, like, we love the Cork I grew up in was the demise of Gouldings, Dunlops and Belfats, or in Gouldings and Fords in the 70s, right? So, like, it was like a good battering.
You couldn't get a job if you wanted one.
Yes, and that was it. So there is that resilience built in. But I think what's important here is, this is not a dictatorship. When you listen to people, you learn things on the way. And in terms of developing the organisation, we put layers into the organisation that protect us against our growth. So the trustees, the code of conduct. When you do that properly, and you have a proper process of growth and building it with the respect of those who are actually supporting you, what you're doing is you're protecting yourself and you're protecting them. And that's what the organization has organically within itself now, is that every, piece of growth, we're putting another layer of protection in to actually, and keep the message on track. This is about, so what is my ambition? My ambition is the legacy of the organization in terms of its narrative and messaging of generosity of spirit, of integrity, of passion and delivery will actually resonate with the next generation. And BITA X is part of that. And someone will carry this on when there's wind out of my sails.
So how do you maintain consistency then? If it's such a fluid thing where you're growing all the time and you're changing. And like consistency, I remember working for a guy and he was like, I don't care if you're consistently good or consistently bad, as long as you're consistent and I can rely on it. Do you think that the members of an organization decides a bit they can rely on it, that even as it changes, as you said, but it still stays consistent to its true purpose, which is people who know people who help people?
That's education within it. And what I'm seeing now is, and I see it like, the proof of the pudding is in eating. So if you look at the organization now and we say 16 chapters between the UK and Ireland, does that mean I'm in 16 counties every week? It doesn't, So you meet people like yourselves who actually understand what the messaging is of the organization, and they become the protector of it, And when they needed my support to reinvigorate or make it more passionate or whatever, just call on me and what I'm able to do. But I think what's happened to the organization is it's grown up. It's grown up and if you take the pillars of what it's all about. So if we take the pillars of a BITA member and we say cost, brand, relationship, blue sky, ESG, they're the pillars. So we look at your costs and we actually give your money back for your membership by relaying your costs back to the ecosystem and giving you value. Because we're part of a collective scrum and there's value in numbers. We look at your brand and we say, who are you? What are you? What did you do? What are they hearing? How are they hearing it? And there's people within the ecosystem of BITA, like yourselves, who actually will help you with that. We then look at the relationships where we have trust. So we have trust with people who are peers in the industry, decision makers, business owners. And we say, here is a fellow member, give him a hearing. So you've broken down the cold call and you've got the narrative of a relationship where there's trust involved. So if you value proposition to them, they're going to listen. Give them a hearing. And then we look at blue sky. Where do you want to be? How do you want to scale up in your business? And, who do you need? What resources do you need to do that? Again, you look upon us. And the capital knowledge is right around us that we can actually, by way of helping, go back to the story of me telling you who helped me in the first instance. There's people around you who will help you build your business. The success is all around us. Then you go into ESG, environmental, social, and governance. If you look at sustainability, the world is not being sustainable enough, quick enough, because we're talking bollocks and we're not doing anything about it. Cop this and cop that, And then you have populist politics stuck in the middle of it, and bureaucracy, and democracy, what that allows that to creep in. But what we've got in BITA is a real fruitful bunch of people who actually break through the barriers of all of that. And if it can be done, it will be done, and we'll find a way. We're not disrespecting anybody. It's not a dictatorship. It is our own type of democracy that is embodied with proper values. And that's what makes it successful. So what we've done is we've done some amazing things. So if you look at ESG and we say environmental, social and governance, we're bringing in products that are innovative products that are affecting sustainable numbers and carbon numbers, right? And if you look at the challenges that they have, because they don't have a kite mark or a standard, a British standard, you're stopping products that are coming in. And we're going, why are you stopping them? The world needs them. So there's a sensibility has to be brought back into the whole equation here. If you look at, we'd say what we do for charity, we distribute our energy and passion to various charities. And last week I came back from South Africa, building 2 schools in 7 days. Incredible energy, incredible community, and the ability to be able to turn around and go, bosh. But we just don't leave it there. We then take girls who are subject to rape on a constant basis out of, the townships and make them literacy teachers in the literacy hubs through Melon Educate. Now, that is nailing it. That is breaking down the barriers, and that is improving, poverty through education. So you're not putting a plaster cast over something. You're actually fixing the problem.
You're creating lasting change.
Yeah, and that's, so we didn't arrive at this. We actually built up the relationships, got involved, but then we acted upon our instincts.
Can you tell us what would be like the most rewarding moment for you as founder of BITA? Can you think of one?
I think the most rewarding moment for me was going to South Africa and actually realizing in a place called Kailisha, the poverty that exists in that place. It is beyond words. And one thing I noted when I went over there was my emotions were overwhelming. But the emotions of those who were looking at me, didn't know any different. So when you've been affected or charmed or you're in an environment that we take things for granted in life, that's when my emotions were overwhelmed. These people didn't know any different. I was over there for 2 weeks and I didn't hear one child cry, because they don't know any different. They smile, they sing, they're amazing. And what it does, it takes you back to going back to where we were reared, The simple things we did on a Sunday when my parents walked me down the marina, went for a walk, and it was the last thing I wanted to do. But it's the memory bank that it gives me is just so, so beautiful. And you watch those trees that were small trees grown up to be, massive oak trees now. And you watch how life, passes by so quickly. The love from the kids out there, we were out there last week now and we were painting this canopy and the kids came in for a cuddle, and they were touching your white skin. It was mad, And, they were looking for my hair. They couldn't find any, but the girls with blonde hair, they were all touching their hair. It was like, and looking at the learning experience that they were going through. And again, it's like what we take for granted in life. So I suppose to answer your question, that was the greatest gift in life that I've got so far.
Does that frustrate you? Like knowing when you're like in a place with so much poverty like that, 1 minute with BITA, and then the next minute with BITA, you're in a plush hotel in the centre of London, sitting down having a fabulous meal. Do you just go, these two realities are part of your reality? Right? Yeah, there's the fact that one exists frustration. Is that why you're...
You could get into a problem when thinking and all, but you can't overthink these things. This is life and you've got to understand it. And what I'm able to do, I suppose, is find a way that I actually impactfully can use the experience to a positive, to actually affect positively their lives going forward. And if I continue to push along with the passion that I have, I know that I have contributed and my contribution is worth something. And if everybody joins and does their piece like that, that's when there can be a huge difference made.
How concerned are you that BITA won't be BITA if there wasn't Paul Whitnell? Like, do you think about that?
No, because I'm getting on what I do and I am what I am. I'm not everybody's cup of tea.
But you're the driving force of it. Like, so, like, in effect, have you negated, or are you planning to negate the point that where there's a single point of failure, that if it wasn't you, it wouldn't be BITA?
I think going back to manifesting, I think that organically something will come along on the way. You've got to keep pushing, keep pressing. Something will come along on the way that will actually, and if I look at, we'd say, the development of the organisation and the people within it, I could pull out 10 names straight away. If I cut them down the middle, they're Paul Whitnell, BITA in the middle, So already we have that. yeah, I suppose I'm a bit more some nature when it comes to my drive. But I would hope that, there's other people in the wings waiting for me to step aside. And when I do, I have a son or two that would perhaps, I don't know, I wouldn't push him into it because it's not something that this didn't just happen. I think I found my lane and I found my passion in life and my passion is people.
We were talking earlier before we came on here, and one of the things that we were discussing was that, you have to look at yourself twice every day when you're brushing your teeth in the morning and the evening. Like, what do you see?
I suppose I would look at myself and say, you need to go to Turkey and get new teeth. That's the first thing I'd say. But I'm not that type of person then to go away and put something on to create a front. So when my teeth go rotten, you're going to have to look at them. I look at myself with that honesty and say, I have now got to the age of my life that when I get up in the morning, I make 100% of an effort. And I hope that God gives me the gift to keep my health long enough that I can continue to strive to make people and the world a better place.
Are you hard on yourself?
Yeah. I work too hard, far too hard.
Talking about manifesting, what are you manifesting at the minute? And what's driving you to get up in the mornings?
I think I enjoy so much when I have a challenge. And I think the challenge for me is certain areas this works. And in a weird, sick manner, it's when it's really sick, I enjoy it more. So coming up to the north today was an example last night. And there's certain people who are very passionate about the organisation, but they're not getting support. And there's unfortunately, our message is not getting out there enough for enough people to respond and say, I'm going to support this. So when I met with that challenge, I suppose my resilience kicks in and I'm going, I'm not giving up, I don't bang the table harder, but what I try and do is trying to, get better at communicating with the people that do give a damn and say, let's peel this back and start again, and that's what it is. So I suppose that's what keeps me alive. Yeah, this is a drug. It's a drug, and it's like seeing it growing in 13 countries now is like, how the fuck did that happen? It's amazing, like. And, seeing the communication of like, I'm an Irish man with an accent that hasn't changed. The Cork man with an accent hasn't changed, despite the fact I'm in the UK 12 years.
There's nothing wrong with that.
And no. And it's funny, you see, here, trying to hear, but I still have fine gas, like when you meet these people who go away to, up to the north for a weekend and they come back and they're talking like that, like, So, but it's like, then when you hear your voice back and you're over in Mexico or America or South Africa or Dubai or Australia, and the narrative is the same, the message is the same, so it hasn't changed, but seeing how they take this on board is quite amazing, and that's what I love about it. So it's like, what keeps me alive is the world is so big, it's going to be a long time before I run out of space.
If you could looking back on your journey, and if you could give your younger self some advice, what would that be?
Be brave early. Be brave early. Listen to your gut. I listened to too many idiots for a long time because I had no confidence in myself. Be brave early.
Yeah, as a mate of mine says that if anybody tells you you can't do something, it's normally because they can't. So you can't start.
Yeah.
Spit a bite. What are you talking about? You can't do it. And you go, well, you can't do it, but I can do it. And on that, could you start it again from scratch? And would you start it again from scratch?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's a drug. I'm hooked.
Would you really, from absolutely nothing?
Yeah.
I don't mean now open another chapter in flipping Luxembourg.
No.
What I mean is, could you start, if nobody had heard of it before, and you decided today was the day you were going to start it. Could you do it again?
It's the rewards that it provides. It's, one of the things that we weren't very good at the start, and we're getting better at it now because of technology and everything like that, was actually recording the data of success that's within the organization. So I loved, going to some places and I'd meet someone who would have seen me on BITA on stage doing what I do, and they come up and say, Paul, and I'm going, who the fuck is he? And because I can't remember everybody. And then he'd regale a story where that out of that day, he went to a lunch and he'd done a contract that was worth £500,000 on the back of just putting him into that lane, And the problem for us at times is like that, if we were told about all these things, it'd be fantastic. But we're not a people gatherer. This is not for everybody, So what we've got to do was get better at collating data and the successes of the organization. So we have different ways and means of doing that now through the website or magazines or the NetHub application that we have now. And that will improve. So the testimony is, and you asked the question about Paul Whitnell's drive. The testimony doesn't become about Paul Whitnell's drive anymore. The testimony becomes about the success that's within the ecosystem of BITA that's created by its people. I'm a driver. That's all I am, But there's four wheels in this bus, So this is where the success is driven by them.
What do you think people will remember most about you in 50 years' time?
That I curse an awful lot. That fuck off is my favourite two words. And when I have on my gravestone, he fucked off. That's what they'll remember.
What about the
Yeah, I mean, I get. Actually, do you know about it? It was a rugby player taught me how to do that. So when I'm in a crowd, and there's a large crowd, there's a way to actually silence people because the frequency of going into a microphone interferes with your ears. So no matter what, if you're in the middle of a conversation, and there's a tip for anybody, right, that if you have a microphone in your hand and you want to quieten a crowd, you just go, and they will just basically saying, what's going on here? And then politely turn around and say, thank you. And you've got your attention. But it goes a bit more than that, because I am synonymous for when someone is actually speaking in an audience, I think it is hugely disrespectful. And it goes back to the values of the organization. So time and time, I've called someone out when I'm speaking. It's not arrogance. It's going back to saying to you, look, you're here to adhere to the values of a community of people that respect each other. So when there's someone speaking, do me a favor, just listen. If you're bored, leave. So, and what we try to kind of mix it up that people don't get bored. So, and these are all the simple messages that exist within the organization. So thanks for reminding me of that one.
What's your best tip?
Don't eat yellow snow.
That's where the Huskies go.
Do you know what? It's keep smiling and keep positive, because the world is full of challenges and we beat ourselves up and we get ourselves down. When you wake up in the morning, if you feel bad the night before, you feel better in the morning.
So what's the plan?
Keep going, build it.
To what?
To where I hope it will move on to the next generation. And as we continue to do the good work we're doing and enjoy how we do it and build a better community of people that actually care about each other, I think, if you look at what's going on in the world, all the different factions, all the different wars, the fake news, I won't mention his name, there's some mad people out there that really don't give a shite. I do.
If you could change one thing in the world, what would you change?
Now that's a good question that I can't answer, because it's so vast that where do you start? There's so many things that are wrong in this world today, And I suppose if we could just look at each other and take time for each other, that would be probably a good place to start. I'm not turning into Holy Joe here. What I'm saying is like that, we've got to make room for people. We've got to make room for, stop pushing our way to the front and start looking around us, because, I said it already in this podcast that the support was actually the foundation of the growth of a good organization. So with good people around you, you actually benefit from. And if we're pushing ourselves forward and it's about us all the time, it's exclusivism, siloism and all this kind of stuff, we're just thinking about ourselves. You'll go nowhere because you'll have no one around you.
Is that why you're such a low tolerance for that? Like,
Yeah. Totally, yeah.
but you're aware of that, like, aren't you?
Of course, and are you all right with it? I'm not all right with it because I've got to manage it and I hate managing it, So I probably driving off. I actually think I drive my own family mad, with this, like, because I know one brother in particular, I drive him off over the edge, Christy, but I've called him out there because I know I drive him over the edge, and it's probably my love for him wanting to, he's my big brother. Like, I want him to be proud of me. I'm yearning for that. And then, but I'd say when I go to the room, that guy takes a breath.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that has to do with that, when you're your true self, you are going to wreck people's heads, like, because you're being yourself. You're not pandering to the masses, like.
No.
So you're unapologetic about who you are. You're going to wreck someone's head. I know when I go into talk, when I'm talking for councils or when I'm talking to big companies, someone's getting annoyed with me being in the room, like, and I understand that. That's okay. Like, I don't have the problem with it because I have enough friends. But I think when you're just being yourself, when you're authentic, and that's, I think, listening to the values a bit, and one of the things that really drew me to the organization was the authenticity of it, like, because it's so easy to be fake. Like, it's so easy to pretend you're something you're not, And I think one of the big problems that we have, especially in business, is like we have a massive mental health problem, and people, that starts with imposter syndrome all the way up to barefaced lies just to get deals, just to get money in. Like, and I think, it talks about, keeping up with the Joneses and people judging their insides by other people's outsides. But I think when you can be, and I think you are, and I'm not blowing smoke, because, as I said earlier, I have enough friends. Like, I think you're really authentic about your message. I don't think it's deviated, although, as you said, it's a bit fluid. Like, but I think you have to take that on board. But when it comes to BITA, I think that's the kind of lighthouse that the ships are looking for. If we can be in an organization that no matter what goes on, your word is your bond, and I'll take you at that. Who doesn't want to be part of that?
I'm not looking in the mirror. So there we go. Do you know what I mean? And you will find people on the way. The fact is, the Cork accent really helps.
Not everywhere.
But that's it. Yeah, I mean, look, it's about, you grow wisdom, you earn it, you grow it, and this is what is very important, is listening to the generation that have done it before, and I suppose that's what I've got better at, is some would say I haven't, but I know I have, is better at listening and wanting to hear people's stories, because the value is in that. The real value is in that. And it's like, if you go back to the age-old listening to Grandad, the reason is Grandad has been there, done that, bought the T-shirt. He bored the fuck out of you telling you the story, but, do you know what I mean? Listen to him. It's absolute gold dust. Storytelling is something that the Irish have a real talent in, I think it goes back again to the simple way of living, of life, that, you retain memories, and memories are things that pop out of yourself, because when you're feeling down, you want to think of a good time and you tend to tell the story. So we became storytellers, and when it's part of your culture, you get better at it because there's a lot of people at it, So if you go to South Africa and look at people sing and dance, God, they're good, because it's part of the culture. We tend to be a community, a culture of people that, the pub fabric was a community. You went to the pub, and if you're feeling bad after a day's work, you talk to a fella for 10 minutes and find out his day was worse. And you go home feeling, Jesus, do you know what? My day isn't too bad at all. And it was that sense of communication, that storytelling, and the ability to be able to share. And if you look at, like, say, the construction industry, and we'd say, you know, the suicide within the construction industry is rife. And one of the reasons is the communication of people actually sharing their problems and being able to be man enough to be able to turn around to someone and talk about something that's sensitive, you know. And particularly in the construction industry, it's a tough old spot, and you're seen to be weak or meek if you can't communicate in that regard, you know. So this is where we, as an organisation, I as a person, believe it's very important that we encourage people to be open and communicate like that. And that's, I suppose, another reason why BITA would be seen as a different organisation, because you can be a tough man, but be a softie at the same time.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing about, you know, the construction work that you're doing in South Africa, and how that it's moving now from Ireland and Britain. Tell us about BITA's plans for the next 10 years and where you plan on going with the organisation.
Well, things like that, and I mentioned this when I came back this year, the learning that you have while we're doing it in South Africa in a place that is abundantly clear that it's needed, you know, doesn't mean that it's not needed in South Kerry or in Dublin or in Cork or in this country, because we also have a problem. But the real problem lies within democracy and bureaucracy. There is no reason why we can't build enough homes to actually cure the whole homeless problem. There is no reason. It's politicians get in the bloody way, you know? And this is where we've got to take the learnings of projects like we do in other parts of the world and put that sensibility in terms of the debate and shake it up a bit and say, this can be done. The solutions are there. The will of the people is there. The willingness is there. So we've got to circumnavigate and change the narrative of messaging. And I suppose, you know, a lot has to be pointed at the political institutions to actually flex and open themselves up to the capital knowledge and prospects that people that have, you know, like us, the willingness to make something happen. Listen, governments don't give a shit about what we do. I'm 12 years doing this without a single solitary relevance of the good work we've done. Shame on you.
And tell us a wee bit about how BITA's going then. So is there a chapter in South Africa then and other parts of the world? Or?
Yeah, I mean, as we go around the world and we demonstrate what we're about, we meet a group of people that become the embryo of that in that said country. So as a result of going to South Africa, we now have an established chapter in Cape Town. And again, it goes back to the very narrative of the first meeting when I walked in and said, what is BITA? And I said, it's people who know people that help people. That only happened recently in Cape Town. And again, you've got the right people who understand the narrative and will take the movement forward. But for them, it's a little easier because they're able to look into the organisation and see the successes and testimony that exist within. So they have something to follow. Whereas when we started it out, there was no map to follow. There's a map to follow now, so it's easier to create that narrative as we go forward. And that's the exciting part of the organisation is as we go around the world and there's people more inquisitive all the time as to what it is. So when we started out, it was the BITA, the British and Irish Trading Alliance. And then as I realised that this was a global phenomena, or could be, it was then we came up with the Business International Trading Alliance. And someone said, that's very clever. How's luck? But when you think about it, it makes sense. So you don't have to be British or Irish to be part of this. You have to be a human being with values.
So do you see the brand changing then in time?
Well, it's changed already. So people now refer to it as BITA International, you know? Now there's a sense of like, you know, there is an affection about the British and Irish Trading Alliance because as trading partners, we are very close, closer than one would think, you know? And there's a respect between Britain and Ireland, more than one would think. despite the fact that we give them 0 points in the Eurovision Song Contest, you know? And despite the fact that when we come to Twickenham or Lansdowne Road, we want to muller them more than anybody else in the Six Nations. But that's part of our history, you know? We don't forget either. But there's a respect and there is a relationship. And in times when times were tough, they were the people that actually stood, you know, by us. You go back to 2008 when the Troika came in. England bailed us out. You know, they're the facts. And it's no, you know, the Irish built Britain. That's a fact. And as many Irish men has made a good living, you know, from the Queen's Pound. And that's a Fianna Fáil man telling you that story. You know? Amazing.
In 10 years, you are looking at growth, like.
Yeah, I want to sustain what the messaging of the organisation and the meaning of the organisation is. I wish and hope that we will build this in a secure fashion, that we can actually create the legacy for the next generation to recognise the value and goodness that's in it for them and that has been in it for us.
So you're proud of yourself?
I don't do proud. Will you stop? I don't do proud. I don't.
Are you proud of the work that you've created? Like,
I hope my mammy's proud of me.
do you stop sometimes, like when you're in South Africa and when you're looking at these young kids and you're creating a space for them to be safe, these women to be safe, and to be able to teach kids linguistics and reading and writing? You must stop at some point and go, I did that.
I stop and have a tear, and I stop and reflect on how sad things can be, and then you take a breath and you go again. But you never dwell on your success because, you know, I can't say I don't have an ego because everybody has an ego. But I don't think
someone say you have the ego of Bono.
But you know,
Some people say me sometimes you do go.
I definitely don't have the ego of Bono, that's for sure. But you know, this is not driven by an ego. It's driven by the passion for continuing to strive towards something that I really believe in.
Yeah, but I get that. Like I believe that, right? Just listening to you and the way you talk about it and the passion that you talk about stuff, I believe you, right? I think BITA is driven by authenticity, and we've already touched on that. Like, and I think, you know, it's easy to be in a crowded hotel room at a do, and you're up and you're on the mic and you're having a crack and say things where you can go, yeah, that man is all about himself. Like, but I think when someone takes it, and we can all be accused of that, and someone takes time and sits down and spends time with us as individuals and goes, yeah, he means what he says, right?
Well, I think it's the consistency of it. I mean, you want to be off your tiny mind to do this for 12 years without being consistent.
But you can't keep up the pretense for 12
No,
years.
you can't. No, you can't. So eventually, the penny might drop. That there's a bit of authenticity in me, and I really mean what I say.
Why do you think you can't take praise?
I think it's in my DNA. I think I'm a giver. I think my mother just splashed give all over me, and I got that giving nature about me. And yeah, there's things that drive me on. One of the things actually recently, in terms of, you know, reaching a goal, was a simple thing for me. Was we actually put a syndicate together for a racehorse called a BITA Crack. Fuck, that's going to be a great crack, you know. And that to me was like coming to a summit, you know. To be able to, little did I know in my life that I'd be the owner of a horse, you know. I wanted him to be named BITA Crack, but we've got this horse called Zanata now, and we've got a group of people that are in it for the fun, and it's called a BITA Crack, you know. So that to me was a kind of like, it was a reward for, and the trust that people put into me. To be able to put that together.
Is there an element of that as that imposter syndrome where you're going, there's a part of you sometimes, and I know it because we're not even from a mile away from each other, like. And I don't know, is it a Cork thing? I think it's a kind of an everybody thing, like, where you look at that and you look at a racehorse and then there's a voice in your head going, hey, you're from Mayfield. I'm from Mayfield. You're not, like. You're from Mayfield. You don't get to own racehorses.
Well, I mean, you're right.
Your imposter syndrome in there.
You're right. You're right. Name Black Rock. Oh, it was different. You know, Black Rock. You're down there with the captain's industry, like. You're right, yeah. Look, it's a milestone. It's something that you would have never, ever envisaged in your lifetime. And then the power of the collective comes in, goes back to, when you can do it and do it as a collective, everything's possible. So it's taking that, as with the organization, anything is possible. And when you have the power of the collective together, no matter how challenging a situation is, when people come together, you can overcome anything. And that's very important.
What would you say you value most about personal relationships?
Trust. Trust within the relationship is absolutely so important.
Do you give it freely? And then if it's broken, that's it, like?
Yeah,
Or do you have to earn it with you?
We'll be victims of that. You do get let down by people, but you get wide as you go on and you see the signs. I mean, we become very kind of, wise to and see signs,
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, I suppose behind every person, there's my mother's influence and father's influence is very important to me. My wife's influence, she's a rock. She's an amazing woman. And
Do you get it sometimes that...
got me going there, you bollocks.
I know my wife says to me, right, she says, you get really annoyed when people don't behave the way you behave. That they don't act the way you act when it comes to integrity, when it comes to keep your word, right? She says, but you need to understand this. No one behaves the way you behave. Right? So when, you have a set of values that's what you steer your ship by, like, right? But you encounter people every day that don't, those values aren't their sales. Do you know what I mean? So do you find that sometimes you grow intolerant of people who don't have what you would call a moral code?
I would say you go the other way and you grow patience because, it's converting those who are, I suppose, insular and consumed with themselves. And you can see it in front of your face that, God, they need help from themselves. And if you can turn that person around in some way, shape or form to see sense in some way, shape or form, it's very rewarding, and it's passing on that capital knowledge. And when you see that happen, and you do see that happen, it's fabulous. And and as well as that, like, as we grow as people, I'm sure there's people who've seen me start the process of what we were doing at BITA. And I know this for a fact. And they see me speaking now about things based on data, experience and, fact. They sit there and go, you're getting better at this. It's taking a bit of practice, but you're getting, you know what I mean? So it's allowing that to happen.
So what do you want?
Give me another 20 years of this. I'd love it. Yeah. And I say, I look at it, I always say, I've probably 15 summers left in golf. Give me another 15 summers.
So do you think you'll be proud of yourself then? Will you ever allow a tie?
I might. I'd say I could be. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any question we should have asked you and didn't?
I suppose, it's when you have to think about something and swerve something, that's when there's something wrong. So I could talk about this all night, but I'd be only fearful of the people listening to the podcast in the room.
Man, Chris, a big go. Well, thanks very much.
Thank
Paul
you.
Whitnell.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
And it's been an experience. So my first podcast.
Cheers.
We say that, right?